Broadly speaking, when I evaluate a lens and its suitability for my photography needs, I tend to look at 5 overall evaluative categories. 1. Optical performance. 2. Build quality. 3. User experience and features. 4. Size and weight. And 5. Price. Economics and physics generally dictate that as you increase the performance of the first 3 categories, you generally decrease the performance in the last 2 categories. So contrary to what some may tell you, there is no such thing as a perfect lens, because there's always some trade-offs that need to be made. The weighting that a photographer puts on each of these categories, however, is totally subjective and is very much dictated by their use case and their circumstances. From the perspective of an average landscape photographer, which I very much see myself as, the Nikon 24-70 f4S lens for the Z mirrorless line, which I've got just here, is a rare example of a lens that almost strikes a near perfect balance between all 5 of those categories. In this video, I'm going to shine a light on this lens and outline the case for why I feel this is the best 24-70 lens I've ever used for my landscape photography. Optical performance. It's easy to fall into the trap of judging the 24-70 f4 harshly due to it being offered as a kit lens, but there's nothing remotely kit lens about its performance. Remember, the 24-70 is an S-line lens, which puts it in the higher tier of the Z mount lenses released by Nikon so far, and looking at the images it produces, it's really easy to see why it's classified this way. The images that this lens creates are outstandingly sharp. I mean, ridiculously sharp, particularly when stopped down to about f8, with really impressive corner to corner sharpness right across the frame. The clarity, contrast and colours that I get out of this are just wonderful, and I really feel that it brings out the best in the 45 megapixel sensor in my Z7. When we do comparisons to the Nikon 24-70 f2.8, there's no doubt that the f2.8 is slightly sharper, particularly in the corners, but the consensus out there seems to be that the actual gap between these lenses isn't all that vast. My cat has abandoned me. For those interested in shooting portraits, events, or in low light situations, the maximum aperture of f4 in this lens is probably going to be a bit off-putting, making the 2.8 probably a far more attractive option. However, for landscape photography, where we're stopping down the lenses the vast majority of the time, I think the f4 is all I need. It really is sublime. Build quality. Now, this lens is never going to win awards for its cosmetic build quality, and I can understand to some extent those that say it feels a little cheap. However, the key word in that first sentence is cosmetic. Yes, the lens lacks a lot of those nice metallic components, which makes it feel nice and weighty and premium. But in all honesty, that matters to me not one single bit. For what it is, the lens feels robust, reliable, well built, and is fully weather sealed, meaning for the things that truly matter to me as a landscape photographer, it delivers. In the last 8 months of using this lens, I've never for 1 second felt that any aspect of its build quality was a weakness. User experience and features. Now, user experience is incredibly personal, making it quite difficult to review objectively. But for what it's worth, I think this lens is a real pleasure to use. The zoom and manual focus rings feel really nice. The autofocus is rapid, silent, and incredibly accurate, giving me the highest levels of confidence I've ever had in an autofocus system. The front of the lens has a nano crystal coating, which is designed to mitigate ghosting and flaring when shooting towards the direction of the sun, and I found it does a very, very good job indeed. The lens doesn't have its own VR built in, but I've found that the IBIS system within the Z camera bodies is perfectly sufficient. And maybe it's just me, but I don't look towards the f2.8 from Nikon and feel envious about its extra LCD display panel or its extra control ring or buttons. The greatest critiques of this lens, which I definitely feel hold some validity, would sit with its focus by wire system and its extension to unlock design. Both of these features can be a little bit annoying, but by and large they don't bother me too much, and I can tolerate them in my landscape photography, mainly because it allows the lens to deliver in the next category: size and weight. The 24-70 f4 weighs 500 grams and is approximately 9 centimeters long when stored in its locked position. Compare this to the f2.8 version, which is about 800 grams and is about 12.5 centimeters long. It's quite clear that the f4 is small, compact and lightweight. Now, in many niches of photography, size and weight are probably less important criteria when evaluating a lens. However, for landscape photography, I feel size and weight are some of the most important aspects to consider on any lens. The best landscape shots which truly push boundaries are almost always located in remote and hard to reach locations. And I've said this many times on this channel before, but there's no point owning the sharpest lenses in the world if they physically start to restrict where you're able to take them. The design decisions that Nikon have taken with this lens has allowed them to create a relatively compact and light 24-70 lens without the usual trade-offs of poorer optical performance. When paired with the 14-30 and the Z7, which is just sitting just there behind me, when this is paired together with them, it makes for a formidable landscape photography setup. Price. The 24-70 f4 retails standalone for about £850. In comparison, the f2.8 retails for about £1,800, making this about half the price. Now, I personally wouldn't recommend buying this standalone at all. You're much better buying this as a kit lens together with a Z camera. If you do it that way, this lens will cost about £500. In comparison to the 2.8, that's 3.5 times the price of this. The second-hand market is additionally awash with loads of these lenses, probably because there's lots of people out there that write it off because it's a kit lens. And use that to your opportunity, because if you go on the second-hand market, you'll be able to pick this lens up surprisingly cheaply, even though the lens is basically unused. I think given how strong this lens is across all the categories I've looked at in this video, I think it offers exceptional value. So in summary, don't let the photography snobs out there convince you that this lens isn't good enough. They're talking complete and utter rubbish. This lens is absolutely magnificent for landscape photography, and I'm going to be using it for the foreseeable future. The only lens that may sway me away from this would be the 24-105, which is going to be a future release from Nikon. It's currently on their Z lens roadmap, but we know very little about that lens. Indeed, I've got no idea when it's even coming out, so there's a lot of question marks. So until I'm convinced otherwise, this is the mid focal range zoom for me, and it perfectly suits my needs, and I feel probably the needs of most landscape photographers.